What if everything you knew was a lie? What happens if everything you thought was real wasn't in fact real, and everything around you was simply lines of code? Well, this is the idea put forward in simulation theory. According to Elon Musk, the chances that we're living in base reality is 1 in billions. Now, in reality, according to experts who have studied this, the chances that we're living in base reality as opposed to a simulation is actually about 50-50, which is still a little disconcerting. If this is a simulation, it certainly doesn't mean that you can pull off those Morpheus glasses. Believe me, I tried. But what are the arguments against the fact that we're living in a simulation? This video puts forward 3 reasons why we're almost certainly not living in a simulation. But first of all, what is simulation theory? Well, simulation theory was put forward by Nick Bostrom in 2003, and he essentially put forward the assertion that post-humans or future humans, future intelligences, are likely to create large simulations and fill them with conscious beings to run experiments about their past. And if that's the case, we're likely living in one. He put forward 3 propositions. That 1, future intelligences simply die out before they can create mass simulations and fill them with consciousnesses. That 2, they simply lose interest in creating mass simulations. Or 3, that we're likely living in a simulation. The reason being that if an intelligent species can create a mass simulation, that it can occupy that with other consciousnesses, that they too could then eventually run simulations. And then again, the next layer down can also run simulations, and you could have potentially an infinite number of simulations, therefore making it very unlikely that we're living in base reality, in true reality. However, there are 3, I think, important arguments as to why this simply isn't the case. First of all, number 1, we're just not very good at making predictions, especially about the future. If you were to ask an alchemist from a few hundred years ago what will life be like in the year 2000, 2020, they'd likely say that the streets will be paved with gold, that they've discovered the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone, and that we've turned base metals to gold. And the reality is, this simply isn't true. We make predictions based off our immediate environment, about our hopes and about our challenges. If you were to ask an alchemist, or a hunter-gatherer from thousands of years ago in their language, or a French revolutionary, make predictions about the future, they would all make very different predictions, and they'd all most likely be wrong. And they make those predictions based off their own hopes, their own challenges, their own technologies, and their own ideas about what they would wish for the future. It's therefore not surprising that today in our technological age, where technology and computers are so important to us, that people are making predictions based around those ideas. If you go back to the 1950s and 1960s and look at the predictions that they had about the year 2000 and 2010, they thought we'd be holidaying on the moon and have flying cars. Of course, they were completely wrong. What we do have is an app that can turn your face into a dog, and that would probably blow their mind. The point is, we have an Overton window of predictability, and it's not very good, so it's almost impossible to make predictions about what post-humans, future intelligences would do. They're just as likely to be spending their time in prayer or contemplation, engaging in spiritual activities, or potentially consuming ayahuasca-type plants and going on hallucinogenic trips, as those are also very interesting ways to answer questions about existence. The other argument against simulation theory is that there are other, simpler ways to answer great questions about the past. Large language models today are becoming increasingly good at making predictions and seeing patterns in text. Now, large language models are not very good yet about making predictions of human behavior and understanding theory of mind. However, they are likely to get infinitely better. We may get to the point very soon, within a few years, maybe a few decades at most, where you could ask an AI, a large language model, what would life have been like for a 24-year-old Mayan living on the summer equinox thousands of years ago? And in theory, it could come up with incredibly accurate predictions, increasingly accurate predictions. You simply wouldn't need to create a mass simulation and fill it with conscious beings to run those experiments. We're also way more likely to get to that point much, much quicker. We're already making huge advancements in AI and large language models, yet we really haven't made any headway in synthesizing consciousness. We don't even have a particularly great definition of what consciousness is. The other point is, if they were to create mass simulations, the truth is you wouldn't need to fill it with billions of consciousnesses, you'd actually only need to fill it with one. And everything else around that one individual could be lower resolution projections. That's a pretty scary thought. And it takes us to that ancient question of how do we know that this is not all a dream, and this is not all taking place in your own dream right now. The other argument against simulation theory is that actually this is repackaging and retooling our innate search for God, for religion. Bostrom himself says, post-humans running a simulation are like gods in relation to people inhabiting that simulation. He also goes on to say that this could give rise to life after death. In this theory, there is intelligent design, that there is an omnipotent creator, an omnipresent creator. Now, it could indeed be the case that this is true, and that all those humans that came before us intuited something about existence, and they understood that there is a great creator. It's just that in reality, that great creator is a programmer in the sky as opposed to a spiritual being. That indeed may be true. But it could also be the case that this says more about humans' innate desire for God, for meaning, for intelligent design, as it does make a prediction about the future. So these are the arguments against that we're living in a simulation. One, we're not very good about making predictions of the future, that we will inevitably make predictions based off our environment, our hopes, our dreams. Two, that there are other ways you can answer complicated questions about the past through AI and large language models. And three, that this is simply retooling, reframing our innate search for God. This argument may indeed prove that God exists, but it may also just be speaking to our innate search for God and simply reframing it in the language of today. I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you believe that we're in fact living in a simulation? Please let me know. And if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe.